Hi, Richard Norton once again here with Senza Ben, and we're just discussing different topics, and one that we've been having a chat about is the subject of fear. I love the saying that I read about Gus D'Amato, Tyson trainer, who said fear is the friend of extraordinary people. And the message out there that is that everybody feels fear. It's what do you do about it and what do you do with it. Even Jeff Thompson, my friend in England, used to say those people that say they don't feel fear, say in a combat situation, are either liars or they're stupid. Everybody feels fear. Again, it's what you do with it. And I think, you know, what I've realized out there, and there was a question earlier at your school, Mr. Faraboys, when somebody asked about a black belt, what feelings did I have on my first black belt? And I said the first thing that came to mind was fear. And what do I mean by that? Fear of expectation, of what's expected of me, and am I able to live up to that expectation? And this is what people forget, that it's such a natural feeling to have, and it's a good thing. There was a great interview with Nicole Kidman when she was talking about some of the scripts she would get and the roles. She said, I am scared to death of every role I get offered because I'm scared I'm going to get found out finally for not knowing what I'm doing. But you know what that fear makes her do and makes us do? It makes you work hard to deal with those fears. In other words, as an actor, you do more study on the character, on the backtext, on the story, on the delivery. Otherwise, if you were that confident, you'd probably just sleepwalk your way through it and it would become a very mediocre performance. And I think, you know, with martial arts, the same, that fear, and Sensei, of course, far more than I could ever, you know, the idea of daring to participate, to step into that ring, to step onto the mat, that fear of being inadequate and everything, the fact that you do it is such a good thing, because if you're going to do it, if you're going to compete, for instance, in a tournament, I remember I competed in the Pan Americans in Jiu-Jitsu way back in Hawaii. It wasn't about the actual day of the match, it was about the months leading up to it where you have to deal with your fear. The fear again of what will my friends think if I get tapped out in the first 2 seconds? What will my instructor think? Gee, my friends think I'm tough. What if I'm up to it? That's all about in here. That's about my own mind, and that journey leading up to the actual day of competing was far more important than the actual day of the battle. Do you know why? Because I've gone through those fears and I had turned up. I had turned up to that battlefield. I bothered to get on the mat, and that for me was a victory. Whether the actual match resulted in winner or loss, for me I already felt like a winner.
And so, you know, I mean, we do talk about fear, but again, you know, the question is, do you fear yourself? And people, when they say, do you fear yourself, what does that mean? And really, it's looking at yourself, fearing, do I fear my anger? Do I fear being judged? Do I fear of losing? Do I fear of being disappointing? Do I fear of not having control? And I'm sure that we can go on and on and on, says Richard, but when it really comes down to it, the fear factor is about, do you fear yourself, means turning yourself inside out and looking at yourself. Do you fear yourself? And if you do, and you can actually say, yes, I do fear myself for a lot of reasons, at least you can continue, by saying it, you can heal those. And even when you heal those fears, they don't go away, but they don't stop you from your better self. Right. And so the fear factor here, you know, fear, what follows fear is anger, what follows anger is frustration, what follows frustration is anxieties. And these emotions in us were actually programmed to us as a child for protection, but they're still in us. And if I could say, the idea of being able to change the chemicals of your DNA. The chemicals that give us fear, anger, frustration, anxieties, those chemicals, we have better chemicals in our body than any pharmacy. It just triggers them by our mind, by the emotions of what kind of experience we've had that triggers these emotions that bring it forward. That means the chemical is bringing that fear, that adrenaline rush, that that anger. And I think that it's truly about learning to turn ourselves inside out and being able to see with these emotions of fear, because again, these emotions of fear is not really, we're not afraid of being hit. We're afraid of what it would look like if I did get hit. Would I cry? Would I get angry? Would I be afraid? So there's a judgment. There's a judgment in that fear base, but it's in our head because it's been taught to us. Okay? Are we good enough or we're not good enough? And so forth. And I think this is the major point when we talk about a fear base. Either it stops you from your better self or it pushes you forward. You know? Right,
and for a lot of people it does stop them daring to participate. I mean, I love for those people that know present day martial artists. I read an article that GSP, George St. Pierre, wrote where he spoke exactly about that, where the expectation would be that, gee, when I get into the ring with so-and-so, am I scared of him, what he's going to do to me, is he going to hurt me? No, his fear again was about self-judgment. If I get knocked out, how bad am I going to look to those people that look up to me, to think that I'm the toughest champion there is out there? But this is why I'm saying fear is a friend of extraordinary people, because what does that make GSP do? Train harder. He just applies himself, he trains harder and harder just to overcome those fears, or at least to do the best to make sure that he doesn't succumb to what he's fearful of. And I think that's a real motivating factor. And Sensei Benny, I love, you told me a story way back, and I wish I filmed the time, when you told me about in the very early days when your fighters were fighting the Thais, when Thais,
right.
You know, Muay Thai first came in, and you're in the dressing room, I'm paraphrasing now,
sure.
And you were talking to one of your fighters because he was feeling fear. And ironically, I don't know whether you remember, but this one time you started to talk about it, a previous match, one of the fighters came in with a broken shin, something like that, a very bad injury, which only compounded the idea of fear, because there was a lot of fear. Oh, the Thais are so strong, their shin kicks, you know, they can break bones and everything else. And it was a wonderful conversation where you went through, well, what are you really scared of? Do you remember that conversation? You said, what are you fearful? Are you fearful of losing, winning? And it basically got down to where you said, well, are you afraid of dying? Because if you can get to where you're not afraid of dying, what is it to be afraid of?
You know, because again, people that are afraid of dying, Sensei Richard, is because they're afraid of living. And most people that are afraid of dying is because they're afraid of living of the expectation of others, that can I be good enough? Am I strong enough? Can I handle it? And a lot of people emotionally get stuck and they're afraid to live. This is what makes them afraid of dying. But if you're not afraid of living, then afraid of dying means I can live to the fullest today and have no regrets. My maker should come from me. I have no regrets because I lived to the fullest today.
Right. I guess what I'd like to finally say when I've thought about this is, and I talked about this once before, and putting it in a martial arts context, this is also something that comes up when one bestows so much upon themselves, and we talked about credibility. Suddenly I'm Master Richard Norton, I'm a 10th degree black belt. The fear of that will often stop me participating because I'm scared of getting found out. So what do? Suddenly there's a seminar, and Sensei Yura is the first one to applaud an instructor that hosts you, that gets in there and does that class with you. But you know yourself, there's a lot that will not do it. They will sit out, they will keep their arms folded. Why? They're so scared their students are going to judge them and find them maybe to be inadequate. So my only message to everybody, and what I always say is, to keep your ego in check, just always acknowledge that you too are just a student. You're just at a certain stage of your journey. You make mistakes. You're an open cup. There is a lot that you can learn. And again, just that acknowledgement that, yes, I'm just a student. I don't know it all. I think that's very, there's a lot of relief that comes from that mindset.
I think that, you know, what happens, you know, I tell my students, I say, don't put me up in a pedestal, because if you do that, You're not allowing me to make mistakes. And if I can't make mistakes, how can I learn? So, you know, as far as that's concerned, you know, is truly when people talk about, you know, degrees of whether they're masters and so forth, I said, you know what? The key to this is learning how to master yourself. And once you learn to master yourself means learning to turn yourself inside out, that you can actually look at yourself and really say, it's great being you. Then you know, that's power.
Right.